How much practice had they had the chance to do?
I mean, it varies hugely, but some of these American guys probably hadn't towed a glider before.
Oh, right.
So it really is, sort of severe inexperience sort of on all sides from that point of view. Parachute battalions, who are used later on in the invasion for the attack on Primasoli Bridge, sort of 3-4 days later. And then you've got 2 battalions of infantry who are available. And they're very light infantry, they're on a kind of minimum weapons in order to get them light enough to go in the gliders. So I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but you're probably not talking, out of about 1,200 infantry, you lose somewhere over 250 of them who are drowned that night, as opposed to, about 100 killed in action during the fighting in Sicily. But that's only out of 1,200 guys.
Yeah.
And you've got the ones who were definitely lost at sea, some of whom were picked up, some of whom drowned. But what it means, of course, is not only with the guys lost at sea, they're all lost, even if they don't drown, they're all lost to the operation in terms of having effect. And then a lot of the other guys are scattered all over the island, which is why you end up at Ponte Grande Bridge, where you were looking at 2 full companies, so somewhere over 200 guys turning up in gliders, with the rest of the battalion to then reinforce them. You actually end up with only 2 gliders landing, one of whom blows up on landing, and you end up with Lieutenant Withers and his 1 platoon to do it.
I wanted to get a feel for myself what the operation had been like, but also, more personally, how my granddad had been instrumental in the winning of the Ponte Grande Bridge.
Okay, here I am in Gozo. This was the last bit of land before the assault on Sicily. If you can imagine the noise of 100 US aircraft flying overhead, towing 100 British gliders, full of 800 servicemen, British Airborne Forces. This was the first operation of its like, and on such a scale between Britain and America. And the Americans were jumpy and nervous. They were new to war. They dropped a large proportion of the gliders off early, once they came under fire by the Germans and the Italians. Over 50 aircraft were dropped in the sea next to us just here. And a large amount of those troops perished. The Royal Navy did their best to rescue as many as they could, but a large amount perished. To the point where only less than 100 British servicemen landed in Sicily in order to do the job that 800 had been sent to do. And they did a phenomenal job. That's what we're going to go and look at now.
An Allied force consisting of glider-borne troops landed here, here and here and here, which was just south of the city of Syracuse. The idea being to capture the road bridge at the Ponte Grande Bridge and also the railway bridge here over the Anapo Canal.
I'm standing here in one of the 3 designated landing zones for the gliders. I can see buildings, scrubland and fully grown trees. Not an ideal place for gliders to land. I can remember my granddad saying that his glider when it hit the ground, it hit a wall and 1 man was wounded. So the gliders, having survived being cut early, crashing into the sea and friendly fire incidents, now had to contend with hitting obstructions in the landing zones, further reducing the amount of people that were available to fight and further reducing the amount of troops available to win the battle. I found an Italian gun emplacement, an armoured pillbox, thick concrete. I can just imagine what an Italian soldier would have felt like in here waiting for the British to turn up. I've got a perfect view of the bridge, the new bridge, but the old bridge would have been right in my view. And I can just imagine the shots that I could take of the British forces as they crossed the bridge. I could almost sit here now and look up and see my granddad firing on the bridge and be shooting at him from this position. My granddad was captured by the Italians. So that he didn't let his weapons and his compatriots' weapons fall into enemy hands, they threw them in the river behind me. Later that day they escaped and became the captors and held the Italians that had formerly held them, but now they had no weapons. So my granddad was detailed off to jump into the river behind me and duck dive through dead bodies in order to retrieve the weapons. I've just seen a dead rat float past. I wouldn't really want to duck dive through dead bodies. or duck dive at all in order to retrieve weapons, but I do want to relive a little bit of what my granddad went through in World War II. So I'm going to duck dive in here to see how he felt. It's absolutely freezing. It's freezing water. I can only imagine what it would have been like to duck dive through dead bodies to relieve weapons and then carry on fighting. I don't think it would have been great.
We're in Syracuse, and as the sun rises over Syracuse, it makes me think this must be exactly the same as when my granddad was here fighting. And he came into Syracuse after the battle. He had 3 days here, and I remember him saying that he had sweets thrown at him as they came into town as liberators when they fell in Syracuse, to muster and work out how many people were missing, how many people had been lost. I remember him saying that he'd lost almost everybody, and there was very, very few people left to fall in and be counted.